All right, good day, students. You're welcome to the second part of Module 2 of the course, okay? Blockchain, transaction, and wallet security. So in Module 2, we're talking about blockchain transaction basics, okay? So give me a moment to share my screen, and we will continue. All right, so 1 second. All right, so Module 2, blockchain transaction basics. So in our last session, we were able to understand how blockchain transactions are done. We looked at the components of blockchain transaction. We even looked at the difference between public and private keys. We looked into details, okay, of that. And we're able to do some practical where we were able to understand the different kinds of private keys that we have and can use, okay? So today, we're going to be continuing from in this module, and we'll be looking at digital signatures and addresses. Digital signatures and addresses. Now, what are these? Well, these are cryptographic tools that are used to ensure the authenticity, integrity, and non-repudiation of blockchain transaction. What does this mean? Sounds like too much grammar. Well, it simply means that these digital signatures and addresses are very important to ensure authenticity and integrity of transactions on the blockchain, which means because of these tools, digital signatures and the addresses, people cannot tamper with a transaction that has been recorded on the blockchain. Now, let's try to understand how this works actually. So, when we talk about digital signatures, we're talking about a mathematical scheme that verifies the authenticity of a message or a transaction. Now, it is created by combining the transaction data with the sender's private key using a cryptographic algorithm. So once this combination is done, all of this is not something you see happening, all right? What you see is the result, okay? Now, the resulting signature is attached to the transaction and cannot be detached. So whenever you want to confirm that this transaction was actually carried out, this digital signature is what helps you to be able to identify that, oh, okay, this transaction was actually done this way. All right. Now, once this transaction is submitted to the network on the blockchain, okay, it can be verified using the sender's public key. Now, don't get confused. This is not the same with the hash. All right. Now, the hash, as we explained, is a unique identifier, okay, that is used to identify a particular transaction. However, digital signatures are used to identify all the transactions that are connected to a particular private key. In other words, all transactions that are encrypted on a particular private key, no matter how many transactions have been done on that particular wallet or private key, you can use the digital signature to be able to access and verify this information, okay? Now, when a transaction is received by the network, it can be verified using the sender's public key, all right? If the digital signature matches the transaction data and the public key, the transaction is considered valid and authentic. Digital signatures provide a mechanism for proving ownership and preventing tampering with the transaction data. All right. So it's basically, for example, if you search for Mr. A's public key, for example, you would be able to see all transactions that Mr. A has ever had in his wallet. Okay? All transactions he has sent or received will be recorded on his public key, and everyone has access to that. Now, all of this is possible because of the digital signature attached to each and every of these transactions. So here's an example that can help us understand how this works. So we have been using Alice and Bob, since we started this module, okay? So for example, let's say Alice wants to send a Bitcoin transaction to Bob, okay? Alice will need to use her private key to create a digital signature for the transaction. Now, how does that happen? By the time she's sending money to Bob, where is she sending it from? Her wallet, isn't it? If she does not have a private key to her wallet, can she access her wallet and send Bob Bitcoin? The answer is no. So by the time she is, sending these funds or Bitcoin to Bob, a digital signature for that transaction is created. So when the network receives that transaction, it uses Alice's public key to do what? Verify the digital signature to ensure that, oh, okay, this transaction was actually carried out by Alice. All right. So it's a pretty easy concept here. Okay. If Alice does not have access to her wallet, she cannot make this transaction. So if someone else has the key to Alice's wallet, or the private key to Alice's wallet, the person will be able to do what? Make that transaction happen by sending Bitcoin to whomever he or she chooses. That's why it's important that we keep our private keys very safe and secure. All right? Because by the time that transaction happens, it doesn't know Alice as a person. Because the person has the access to the private key and carries out a transaction, the moment it reaches the blockchain will not say, oh, no, this is not Alice that sent this transaction. No. What the blockchain uses to verify that the transaction is coming from Alice is by comparing the digital signature of that transaction if it matches Alice's public key. All right? Or rather, Alice's private key. Okay? So once the transaction data matches the public key, the transaction is considered valid and authentic. All right? So this is exactly how digital signatures work on the blockchain. So it's a concept that helps us understand that, look, this is the reason why each transaction that is done on the blockchain cannot be tampered, because the authorization is coming from the original owner of the wallet. And the original owner of the wallet is who? The one who possesses the private key. So if Alice gives out her private key and someone else uses the private key, access her wallet, send money, that person becomes the original owner. That is why security of the private keys are very, very important. Okay. Now let's move on to addresses. Now this is very straightforward, and I'm pretty sure more than 90% of all of us know this. Okay. So the addresses are simply the public key we've been talking about. Okay. So public key equal to addresses, because these addresses are used to do what? Encrypt data or transaction on a particular public key or wallet. Okay, so the addresses serve as identifiers for participants in the blockchain network and are derived from public keys. Okay, this is what you give out to someone to be able to do what? Send you money. Okay, and they are usually represented as a string of alphanumeric characters. We know numbers and alphabets. Of course, no symbols. We don't have symbols on a public key. So it could be a capital letter, a small letter, or numbers. That's it, alphanumeric, no symbols at all. However, this is something about blockchain. These addresses on the blockchain does not carry the identity of the human owner. So there is no way you're going to access a blockchain and you see a particular address and it tells you owned by Michael Briggs. No, you can't see that. It's completely anonymous, okay? And that's why, notice here it says, addresses provide a level of anonymity for users as they do not directly reveal the identity behind the addresses. So no one knows. The only way you can know is if the owner of the address, in some blockchains, there are options where people have the access to put in a private note. Okay, so you can put in a private note to your address, and someone who has access to the blockchain can read the private note and be able to see, okay, Mr. This owns this address. Or another way to identify the owner of a particular address is through KYC. This is going to be done in the very last part of our course. How, KYC, which is know your customer, is bridging the anonymity in the blockchain. Okay, so if you've done your KYC and all the details you've provided, your name, your date of birth, your ID, whatever it is you've provided, it's all associated with your address. So once that address is seen, cross-check through the database of the company who has done the KYC, they'll be able to track and say, okay, this address belongs to this person. Okay, so, but aside from that, all addresses on the blockchain are anonymous. That's why someone will steal funds from your wallet and you'll be tracking. Can you help me track the person? Sorry, we'll track and see where the money went to, but to identify the owner of the wallet, it's hard to know. But later on in our course, we'll see some interesting ways that we could actually find out the identity of certain wallet owners, okay? But this is just basic information. So an example is given us here. It says, for instance, a Bitcoin address is generated by applying cryptographic functions to the public key. It serves as the destination for receiving funds and can also be used to verify ownership in transaction outputs. Yeah, public key, address, same, right? No difference. So the example here is when Bob shares his Bitcoin address with Alice for receiving funds, he can be confident that the funds sent to that address can only be accessed by him with his corresponding private key. So guys, if you've noticed, in this module, we've been talking about the same thing, but in different ways. Why? We're trying to emphasize the importance of your private key. We're trying to tell you how much power your private key has, that if you lose it or compromise it, give access to someone else, then all those authority and power you think you had is gone to someone else. Okay? So very, very important. Share your public key, your address. That's it. Share it for people to send money to you and all of that. However, your private key is private. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll tell you this. Don't even share it with your trusted friend, your wife, your children, your husband. No. Guess what? Your husband or wife or daughter or whoever, has your best interest at heart. Of course, wouldn't want to go steal your money, okay? However, this person could be, careless. This person could be, less concerned about the security. And because it's in his or her possession, could do what? Expose it or compromise it and give other people access to that information without even he or she knowing, okay? So that's why you who understand how to secure this private key, keep it to yourself. Like I said, We're going to show you the best practices on securing your private key later in this course. Okay. Now let's move on to the last section, which is transaction validation and confirmation process. Okay. So how are transactions validated and confirmed on the blockchain? So in the blockchain network, transactions go through a validation and confirmation process to ensure their integrity and achieve consensus among network participants. Okay. So when a transaction is initiated, it is broadcasted to the network for validation. Yes. When we say broadcasted, it's sent across to all the nodes in the network. And when we talked about nodes, we said nodes are computers in the network. So the nodes in the network do what do they do? Including miners, okay? Verify the transaction's validity by checking various criteria. And what are these criteria? The criteria include verifying the digital signature, confirming the availability of funds, and ensuring that the transaction adheres to network rules and protocols. Okay. So now this is how transactions are validated. So earlier on in the earlier part of this module, we talked about UTXOs. Okay. Unspent transaction outputs. Now, these unspent transaction outputs are what determines if you have sufficient funds to be able to do what? Send money to someone. So the transaction is validated in the sense that one of the things that are being checked is, do you have enough funds to make this transaction go through? All right. Now, the UTXOs is what, is verified to determine if you have enough funds to transfer or to send money. Also, the digital signature of that transaction is also checked. And when we talk about the digital signature, as we mentioned earlier, we're talking about identifying the source of this transaction. And the source, the destination of the transaction. Okay, so if I'm sending money from my own wallet, right, it verifies that, okay, I am approving that this amount of money is moving from this wallet to that wallet. And also, it is able to verify that that wallet you're sending to is a correct wallet. We're going to talk about this much later because this is where a lot of people have made a lot of mistakes. Okay, you're sending to a wallet and you're actually typing the wallet address. Well, that's really, really risky. We never, ever type a wallet address. Never. We don't do that. And that's why the technology of copy and paste is so paramount when it comes to blockchain transactions. Okay, so you must copy and paste, because if you're typing that very long string of characters, you definitely would miss or change something, and that could be very detrimental. Even changing a small letter C to a capital letter C can nullify and make you send that transaction to a completely different address. Okay, so in order for a transaction to be validated on the blockchain, it checks for the digital signature, it confirms the availability of funds, and ensures that the transaction adheres to network rules and protocols. For example, we're talking about network rules. You have to pay a fee. All right. Do you have enough funds in that wallet to pay the network fee or the gas fee? These are the things that are checked. If you don't have enough fee to pay and you send it across, it's going to fail. The transaction will not be validated. Okay? So here's giving us an example. Okay, so for example, the Bitcoin network, miners validate transactions by checking the digital signatures, verifying the UTXOs used as inputs, and confirming that the transaction adheres to the consensus rules defined by Bitcoin protocol. Okay? So that's how transactions are validated on blockchain. Now, what about confirmation? All right. So usually when you send a transaction, you would actually have to wait for it to be confirmed. Now, when we talk about confirmation, we're looking at how many nodes have validated this transaction. So some blockchains have a number of validations that is required for a transaction to be confirmed. Okay. Now, once a transaction is validated, it enters the confirmation process. So miners in the network, which include who are rather part of the nodes that make up the network, okay? Miners in the network compete to include the transaction in a block by solving complex mathematical puzzles, okay? Now, let's make this easy. I mean, in a very layman language, okay? Now, you send a transaction. The transaction is being validated by checking the transaction output input, which is the UTXOs. Do you have enough funds in the wallet? It checks. It also checks if you are complying to the consensus protocols for that network. It also checks the address, all right? The digital signature, okay, connected to that wallet from which the transaction is coming, okay? Now, once all of these are checked and everything matches, is perfect, then it's been validated. Now, it's validated does not mean that the transaction has succeeded. The transaction only succeeds when it has been confirmed. Now, the confirmation process is simply the process of more than one node validating that transaction. So let's say in the network node, there could be 100,000 nodes in the network, rather. There could be 100,000 nodes, which is 100,000 computers, okay? Now, each of these computers, including miners in the network, how do they confirm this transaction? So if my laptop or my computer is a supercomputer, very fast, it will be the first to do what? Go through this validation process and do what? Add it to the block. So, okay, I've checked. It's okay. I add it to the block. The very first person to do that, that's one confirmation. The second node, which is the second computer, second fastest, validates this transaction and confirms it by adding it what? To the block. So one confirmation, two confirmations, the third computer, three confirmations, the four confirmations. So in a network, some blockchains have a number of confirmations that is required for a transaction to be successful. So some will tell you, for example, if it's Tron, or rather if it's Binance Smart Chain, a minimum of three confirmations and that transaction is successful, which is 1, 2, 3 computers have validated and confirmed this transaction, added it to the block, that transaction is confirmed. So you receive your money. Without a transaction being confirmed, that money will not reach its destination, because it means that there is some problems with the validation of that transaction. And that is why it will not be confirmed. So if a transaction is having a validation problem, then it will not be confirmed. It will not go through. For example, you sent some money, you didn't put enough gas fee. It's not going to go through, all right? Because the validation process was not completed. Okay, so that's basically how confirmation works. So the first miner to solve the puzzle adds the block to the blockchain, confirming the transaction. So the confirmation process adds an additional layer of security measure and ensures that the transaction is included in the blockchain's immutable history. Okay? So once the transaction has been confirmed, it is added to the block. Remember, once added to the block, can never be changed, can never be removed, can never be altered. Nothing can be changed to that transaction. All right? And remember, the moment that is done, it generates what? A unique hash to identify that particular transaction. Okay? So just as more blocks are added on top of the confirmed block, the transaction becomes more deeply embedded in the blockchain, making it increasingly difficult to alter or reverse. Easy? Okay, let's see a very simple example. So let's take the Ethereum network, for example, okay? So once a transaction is confirmed and included in a block on the Ethereum network, it is considered finalized after a certain number of subsequent blocks are added on top of it. So let's see an example of such a transaction. I'm gonna open a new page here, and let's see Etherscan. Let's look at the Ethereum blockchain for a moment, .io. So the URL for Ethereum blockchain is etherscan.io. So let's take a look at a few transactions here, all right? Now, let's say transaction for this one, 15 seconds ago. Okay, now did you notice something here? It tells us 3 block confirmations. All right, 3 block confirmations. Now, as you notice, you're going to see that more confirmations will be added to this transaction right here. But let's take note of the number of the block. So since the inception of Ethereum, it's telling you that this is the, let me get this number straight, 17,712,422nd block that has been added on the Ethereum blockchain. So this particular transaction. So the moment you search for this block, now let's take note of the address. If we look below, we're going to see the address. Okay, so from this address to this address. All right, so the person is sending from this to this one. Now, take note of the very last, OFD6. Now, if we search this block, now take a look at some of the details, the transaction fee, the amount that was sent, the value, okay, 0.4, okay? And then the gas fee that was paid. See what I told you? Transaction fee is the fee charged by the network. The gas fee is the fee charged by the blockchain, okay? Now, all of these parameters are correct, and that's why this transaction was a success. Now, if we go to this block right here, if we go to this particular block, we should be able to see this transaction in this block, and that's about 0.40 Ethereum, and with an address sending from 0FD6. Okay, we're going to check that now. But let's see, this 3 block confirmations should have increased. Let's just refresh this page and let's see how many more confirmations. Okay, do you notice now? 15 block confirmation. So that's how more blocks are going to be added. Maybe you come back tomorrow to this particular transaction, you'll see something like 1,000 or 2,000 block confirmations. It's deep in the blockchain. The only way you can access it is by the unique hash. Because if it's like a book where you have to be opening one to get to it, you open forever. Okay, so that's why the unique hash is there, and the block ID is there. So now let's click on this block and see for ourselves what is included in this block, okay? So we see a block, the block height is 17,712,422. So this is the first block. Notice it says status is unfinalized, which means that the amount of transactions required to be on this block is yet to be complete. All right? The amount of transactions required to be on this block is yet to be complete. So if we look here, excuse me, we're able to see, okay, now on this block alone, we see that there are about 122 transactions, 58 contract internal transactions in this block. So why it is saying unfinalized is because there is a set amount of the number of transactions that are required to be done on this block for it to be complete, or rather, let's say full. Okay, so once that amount of transactions are completed, then this block is done. No other transaction will be added to it. All right. So this is exactly how it works on. And now, if we look at the amount of transactions, we will be able to see that first transaction that we, saw when we opened up this page. So let me just clear this. Okay. Now let's check on the transactions here. 122 transactions. Now you see all the transactions that are on this particular block. So transactions for this block are listed here. So new transactions are being added minute by minute, second by second, okay? Now, if we look at the transaction, I think we were supposed to see 0.405 ETH that was sent, okay? And this is exactly it. So 5 minutes ago, so no other transaction has yet been added to this block. You see, this is the amount of the transaction. That's the latest transaction on this block. The moment a new transaction is added, it's going to be added to this block again. So we have 122 transactions already found on this block. Okay? So once the amount of transactions required to complete this block is there, that's it. The block is completed. All right? Clear? So this is an example of how, these blockchain transactions are done and can be seen on this page on Etherscan. That's Ethereum blockchain. Okay. 1 second. Where's my page? Sorry, give me a moment. Oh, that should be this one. Okay, so yeah, so this one. All right, so once transaction is confirmed and included in the block, it is considered finalized. Okay, so if we attempt to go back, we had 15 transactions previously, right? Where is it? Let's go back one step. 15 block confirmations. Let's refresh this page and see how many more confirmations we have. Wow, 37 block confirmations. Can you see it? 37, which means more than 37 nodes have confirmed these transactions. And we have the block number 17,712,422. So how many blocks have been added on top of this block? Let's find out. Let's go back. So just take note of the last 1,000, which is 2,422. And let's see how many more blocks have been added. So we're going to just refresh this page and see latest block. So we had 2,422. Now we have 2,461. So if you minus 22 from 61, so that's going to give us roughly about 39. Am I correct? I don't know math a lot, but I think I'm right. Okay, so 39 blocks have been added on top of this particular block having this transaction. By tomorrow, maybe an extra 1,000 block must have been added on top of it. So this is exactly how we can, why we say that a block, once a transaction is done on the blockchain, that's it. The more blocks are added on top of it, the more authentic that transaction becomes, okay? All right, so let's use this picture here to just summarize all that we have learned in this module, okay? Now, this picture is showing us how, the process of blockchain transactions, okay? Understanding blockchain transactions. Let me just make it. All right. So, first of all, we have the UTXOs, which is the unspent transaction outputs, all right? Which is checked by the input of the transaction. So, for example, you put in $100. It checks unspent transaction output. How much do you have? Do you have up to $100? In fact, if you have exactly $100, do you have enough to pay for the fee of that transaction? It also checks that, okay? And then what is also contained in that transaction you're trying to send would be the public key, okay? The public key hash of the owner's address. The person you're sending it to. Who are you sending this money to? Okay? And the address, which is yours, you who is sending the money, your own public address would also be connected to the transaction. Because if you notice in these transactions that we looked at here, the moment we click on it, we'll be able to see from who this was sent and who it was sent to. So you see from and to. So this is the public address of the person that sent the wallet, the money. And this is the public address of the person who the money is being sent to. So these two are included in the transaction of the blockchain. And then the owner's signature, like we said, which is a signature that is generated using the public address, rather the private key of that of the sender and the address he's sending to generates the signature of that transaction. Okay, all of this information are included in the transaction and are done what? Broadcasted to the network. All right. So once all of these have been included in that transaction, only the receiver with access to that wallet by means of his private key will be able to redeem the amount that has been sent, which is going to be the transaction output, which he will receive. Okay? And we see here that each node in the network validates this transaction. And once it has been validated by the network participants or the nodes, then that transaction will be confirmed by those nodes. And once it's confirmed, it's added to the block. And once added to the block, that's it. The person receives his money. Okay? So sometimes so there could be some delays. I mean, we've gone past that level of that kind of by means of improved technology. We've gone past the time where you have to send Bitcoin and then you have to wait 1 day, 2 days for the transaction to be confirmed. Why? Because there were fewer miners, fewer nodes in the network, and the amount of transactions, the volume of transactions were just too much for the few amount of nodes in the network to be able to verify those transactions. So it could take a long time. It could take days. Oh, sorry. Yeah, days. It could take a couple of hours or even a day. I've done a blockchain transaction and it took 2 days to be able to be confirmed and reflected. Now, interestingly, if the transaction fails, the money would not leave your wallet. It's gonna come back. Okay, so it's not like okay, like in the bank, if you try to send money from someone to another person from your account to someone else's account, and the money goes, but the person doesn't receive the money, you could go to the bank and make a complaint, right? So on the blockchain, who do we go to make a complaint? If I send money to Mr. A, it leaves my wallet, but it doesn't get to Mr. A. Who do I meet? Okay, so in this case, the blockchain is programmed in such a way that it never ever takes money, into the thin air. It doesn't happen. If that happens, it means you have made a mistake, perhaps in the public address you were sending to. On a normal day, if it doesn't go through, it's refunded to your wallet and you can try again. And that's because the validation process was not complete, which means perhaps you didn't have enough gas fee, or the UTXO confirmed that, oh, look, you didn't have enough that you were trying to send. So these are some of the conditions that could make such a transaction, come back. Okay, so from this picture, we've been able to see basically all we've talked about. Okay, the private key, remember, it's very important. You have to keep it safe, because without it, you cannot decrypt the information or money sent to your wallet address. Okay, so in summary, this module has provided us with an extensive understanding of blockchain transaction basics, and we've been able to explore the components of a transaction, the role of public keys and private keys. We'll talk about digital signatures, addresses, the process of validation and confirmation of transactions. Okay, so we are very convinced that these concepts, the better you understand this concept, the more the more solid, okay, the foundation you would have in understanding more complex aspects of blockchain technology. Okay, how transactions are executed, how they are secured or recorded in the blockchain, and these will help you to be able to, assimilate the future information that we're going to share with you on this module. Okay, so thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to, send a message in the classroom. Just ask the questions based on what you've watched, what you've read, and I will be delighted to answer you directly on the classroom. Please don't send questions about the course material to our email. Emails should be only for inquiry or, assistance with maybe some technical issue or whatever it is. But when it comes to the course materials or the videos, you have a problem trying to understand the concept that was explained, send a message on the classroom under the module 2 section, and we'll be able to assist you. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm going to stop my sharing now. And thank you once again. Have a lovely day, everyone.